Well guys, the review embargo has lifted. The reviews of the 3070 are out, and my first thought is that it's basically exactly what I was predicting through my coverage of leaks. So if you've been following that, then there's not any major surprises here. If you haven't been following that, you could subscribe to my channel if you're interested in technology, especially PC-related technology and coverage. Let's dive in here though and take a look at what we're seeing. So I'll link all of these sources in the video description so you can take a more detailed look yourself. So if you go to VideoCardz, you can get a roundup of just tons and tons and tons of reviews. I haven't read all of these myself, but I have taken a selection to kind of compare what everybody's seeing from this and what should we take away. So I've watched a few video review sources as well as some written ones. Let's start out with some of the written ones, and then I'll discuss how everybody's thoughts kind of compare. So one that I'd actually, you know what, let's start out with The Verge. So they have an interesting take here, which is that basically the 3070 is a 1440p sweet spot. It's an absolute killer at 1440p, but they felt like at 4K, it's maybe not delivering the performance that everybody will be looking for at that level. So to get into their little summary here, they're saying like, you know, it's a quiet and cool card, and a lot of people had positive things to say in the other reviews about the cooler design working well. By the way, this is a good chance to mention that all these reviews are based entirely on the Founders Edition. The review embargo has not lifted for the board partner models yet. And I have some thoughts about that, but I don't want to get into that right now at the start. But these are all specifically about the Founders Edition. The Verge was also very happy with DLSS boosting frame rates when it's available, and I also agree that when it's available, DLSS is a cool feature for NVIDIA cards. And we have not yet seen AMD have a direct answer that works at that same quality level, although that reveal is coming up tomorrow, and that's also a big deal. And again, stay tuned to this channel if you want my coverage and thoughts on the AMD launch. Now, they are saying that it does have a lot of power draw, although honestly, from my opinion, if you compare this to the 3080, for example, the power draw is actually a huge advantage because, okay, it's more than like the 2070, but it's much, much, much less than a 3080. Again, they're feeling like it's not quite enough headroom for 4K, and that the 8 gigabytes of memory is a drawback compared to a 3080, which has 10, compared to a 2080 Ti, which has 11, and compared to AMD's cards, which we're pretty confident at this point are going to be shipping with 16 gigabytes of video memory. Now, I'm not going to look too much into their detailed reviews here on The Verge for individual tests. Let's hop into some other sources to see where they fall. Now, pretty much where they're going to fall is exactly the same as a 2080 Ti. And that's one of the big questions a lot of people had going into this, is basically, is the 3070 a 2080 Ti killer? Because that narrative definitely picked up online after the announcement from NVIDIA saying that it could beat the 2080 Ti in terms of performance. And the thing is, it can, but it also sometimes doesn't, and in reality, it falls plus or minus a few percent, like in either direction, depending on the exact application or game that you're talking about. So if we actually look at tests, it basically performs like a 2080 Ti, and that's exactly what I predicted with my coverage of various leaked sources leading up to this. Now, if you're going to look at this Tom's Hardware article, I'll say this is a great place to find a lot of useful charts if you really want to dig in to a whole bunch of data. I'm not going to show all of it to you guys here, but again, I'll have a link to this Tom's Hardware article. The ones that I wanted us to look at here is, one thing is they have a nice comparison on the size, because one thing that you might care about is the power draw and the size, depending on the type of build that you are doing and the sort of case and power supply that you're working with. Notice it compared to the 3090, 3080, and there's the 3070. It's also smaller than a 2080 Ti, and it has significantly less power draw than a 3080 and 3090, and it has somewhat less power draw than a 2080 Ti, so that's an important thing to consider. Now getting into the charts. So at 1080p, I don't want to spend too long here, but here's their 9-game average at 1080p ultra settings. And as you can see, I mean, it's crushing it as far as 144 hertz at 1080p, not an issue. So if you're sitting at 1080p looking for 144 hertz, this is a card that can absolutely meet those requirements for you. If we go down to their, let's go to their 9-game averages again for this time 1440p. Sorry guys, take me a second to jump in here. So here's their 9-game average at 1440p Ultra. And again, you can split this out by game if you come here and want to compare it game by game if there's particular titles you're interested in. Now, once again, at 1440p, we're seeing averages up here around 125 frames per second. So again, if you're interested in the 120 hertz plus range for 1440p, the 3070, again, seems like an absolutely killer card for that level of performance. So at 1080p or 1440p, the 3070 is most likely going to meet all of your needs. You're not going to start up a game and be super disappointed by your frame rate using this card at 1080p or 1440p. Now again, these are just scrolling quickly through the individual games. I'd encourage you to check this article out if you want those details. But now let's take a look at 4K. So at 4K, we're seeing the 3070, again, with some nice averages. So averaging above 75 frames per second. But again, the lows dip significantly below that. And in certain titles, you're definitely not going to be getting 60 frames per second at Ultra. So again, and then again, look at it compared to like a 3080. You're seeing a big drop off where the 3080 can more easily push 60 frames per second or higher at a very solid performance level. It'll feel nice and smooth. So again, it depends on what kind of frame rates you're looking for there and whether you're gaming at 4K. So keep that in mind. And again, the nice thing with the TARM's hardware articles, by the way, if you're looking at one to dig into in more depth, is that they do include a lot of previous generation cards as well as some AMD cards thrown in here. Not all of the people published articles comparing to those. All right, so let's hop on over to some of the YouTube reviews. So if you pop over to like Linus Tech Tips, for example, they have a bunch of charts game by game in different settings, but if we want to just go to their overall performance summary, they have one done by percentage. So if you set the 3070 to the 100% and then compare it to a 3080, it's falling short in gaming by about 16% compared to the 3080, and in productivity, about 21% short of the 3080. But it is meeting 2080 Ti levels of performance in gaming at basically 100%. Now, that's not in every game, that's on average. In some games, it was slightly better. In other games, it was slightly worse, but it's basically the same as a 2080 Ti. And it can actually slightly beat the 2080 Ti in some productivity tasks, although they did point out at LTT that in workstation tasks like SpecView Perf, for example, it actually fell significantly short of the 2080 Ti due to the 2080 Ti's larger memory bandwidth compared to the 3070. So that is something to keep in mind. And again, if you're like me, I actually currently own a 2070. So if I was doing this comparison, I would notice that in gaming, I would get almost double the performance on average in the tests that LTT ran here. Again, this isn't representative of every single game ever made. Another good YouTube source is Gamers Nexus. So I would recommend the Gamers Nexus review, especially if you are interested in detailed rundowns of the way the hardware is performing in terms of thermals, power consumption, all of those things to do with the actual details other than just its performance in games. Now, to be clear, they also cover the performance in games and benchmarks, but they go into much greater depth in things like thermal performance compared to other cards. They also do a little bit of overclocking and try to get some performance numbers for overclocking and overclocking compared to other cards. So Gamers Nexus tends to have very long videos here. I think this one, yeah, 33 minutes, but could be worth skipping around here, and they do tend to timestamp things, or yeah, so things are nicely time-stamped if you want to get certain things out of this and not watch the entire thing. So what I'd like to point out here again is the power draw. That's why I froze it at this screen, because they're saying that they're getting about 227 watts of use out of the 3070, and I think a little bit higher if they overclock it. But again, I think it was around 245 when they overclocked. And then as you can see, compared to like 3080s, especially overclocked 3080s, it is significantly less power draw, like 100 watts less, and more than 100 watts less if you're overclocking the 3080. So that is a big thing to keep in mind. Once again, if power consumption is an issue for you, as I've said in previous videos, I only have a 650 watt power supply. So I think I can get away with a 3070, but I might struggle a bit more with a 3080 in my system. That's something I'm having to consider when I'm thinking about this upgrade. Now, if we look at another good YouTube channel, we've got JayzTwoCents, and once again, they were kind of confirming that in general, it comes out pretty equivalent to a 2080 Ti, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, but always within just a few percent. Now, one thing that some of these reviews notice that if Blender is something you compare it to, compared to a 2080 Ti, it actually has the 3070 has significantly better rendering performance in Blender. I think it was around 20% better in the Blender application. So if that's something you care about, that is one of the places you'll see a big difference. So I could hop around to other articles and everything, but I think this really brings something up right here that matters, and a lot of these other reviewers mention it if you watch it, and it's also my opinion, which is this review is only so useful right now because AMD's reveal comes out tomorrow if you're watching this on the 27th. So AMD is likely to have better rasterized performance at lower resolutions like 1080p and 1440p. And again, it's looking like, and you can look back at my last couple of videos if you want to see the leaks I'm basing this on, but it is looking like the AMD cards, the Big Navi cards, are going to be better than a 3080 in a lot of situations, especially rasterized performance, and especially at 1440p, but also in some games at 4K. And that's compared to a 3080. What we really don't know from AMD is pricing. So that's definitely something you're going to want to stick around for and take a look at. So if you're like me, you're not going to be rushing out to buy one of these things. You're going to be taking a little while to see how everything really plays out. So what are my final thoughts on this? Okay, so should you buy this? Who should maybe just try to get in line and buy one of these right now? Well, if you already know that you will be going with NVIDIA, and you've thought through all the comparisons, and again, if you watch some of my last couple of videos talking about AMD leaks, I go into a lot of details about reasons why some people would prefer NVIDIA based on some of the extras they throw in there, like the better ray tracing performance, DLSS, and a lot of people feel like their drivers are more stable, although a lot of people say they've never had issues with AMD drivers, but some people do have issues with them. And I go into a lot of other reasons why as well. So if you're somebody who is convinced you are getting NVIDIA and you're not going to be convinced otherwise, and your price point is around $500 and you're going to be gaming at 1440p, then the 3070 looks like an extremely compelling option, and the only reason you might want to wait if you know you're going with NVIDIA is just to see how they might respond to AMD's launch by either dropping prices or refreshing their lineup. Speaking of refreshing their lineup, there are some rumors about the, what are our headlines currently? We've got some stuff where we should be seeing like a 3060 Ti specifications being confirmed, right? There's also a 3080 Ti in the works. So there's definitely a launch of some other NVIDIA cards coming out. So if you're definitely on the NVIDIA train, you might still want to wait and see what their response to AMD is with cards like this. Because again, if the 3070 might be overkill for you, especially if you're at 1080p, you might want to stick around and see what the 3060 or 3060 Ti can do. Also, another thing to consider is that these are the Founders Edition reviews, and we haven't seen the board partner reviews yet. Those are still embargoed. I'm not sure if I like NVIDIA's decision to have different dates on those, although it does get them 2 rounds of review coverage, so I understand from a marketing position why they've chosen to do that. Anyway, so we haven't seen the board partner cards. Now, also to consider with the Founders Edition launch is where do you live? Because in the United States, you'll have to get one at Best Buy or Micro Center. I believe in Canada, you can also get one at Best Buy. But worldwide, I'm not sure what it's like in different countries and if it's even necessarily available in all countries. And you guys can let me know in the comments if you have more info on what's available in other countries. Because, yeah, I guess probably due to the difficult launch, and that's putting it mildly, of the 3080 and 3090, NVIDIA seems to have given up on selling cards directly through their store and has partnered with Best Buy as their primary seller of their Founders Edition cards. Okay, and again, that's just the Founder Edition cards from NVIDIA. The board partner cards will sell normally in all sorts of places like they always do. Now, you know, if it's me, I'm just saying wait. We really need to see what AMD is bringing to the table. Big Navi looks extremely impressive. And even if you're not going to go end up buying a Big Navi card, depending on what you see, I think NVIDIA is going to have to respond. And this is really exciting. And that's my final takeaway is unless you absolutely have to have a card right this second, I think it's going to be a lot more worthwhile to wait and see how things play out. Although you could try to get in line to get a 3070, and due to the supply constraints, I'm certain that you'll be able to resell it, maybe even at a profit, although I don't support scalping cards. But buying one so that you have it, and then if you find out that you'd prefer something else that comes out in the meantime after the AMD launch, something like that, you could then try to resell it and probably will be able to recoup your price there due to the current demand compared to supply. So that is another route you could go. I'm really interested what you guys think in the comments section. One of my favorite things about starting up this YouTube channel has been getting to talk about all this stuff with you guys in the comments. If you made it to the end of this video, it would help me out if you hit the like button and maybe even consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. That helps me out on YouTube, and it's been really fun starting out on YouTube and seeing which videos take off and get a bunch of views or not. It's been fun. Anyway, thank you guys. I hope you have an excellent day.